All right, today we are going to continue on in section 1.3. So we left off last time about learning about our interquartile range. So today we are going to look at identifying outliers. So remember when I talked about outliers and we were describing graphs and we said it appears there might be an outlier. Now we're actually going to get a rule that tells us whether or not there really is an outlier. So the most common rule is to use the 1.5 times our IQR rule. So what this tells us is that an observation is an outlier if it falls more than our 1.5 times our IQR above the third quartile or below the first quartile. So these are our formulas. It's a low outlier minus 1.5 times our IQR, meaning to the right if it's greater than Q3 plus 1.5 times our IQR. So we're going to work through an example on what we're doing here and figuring out if we have outliers. So on here you can see I have the data from our highway fuel economy ratings for our 2018 Toyota 4Runners. And then I have the data. I gave you a dot plot. So by looking at this dot plot, you might say, oh, hey, this 21.5 and this, what is this, 23 point something up here, looking at 23.3, those might be outliers. They look like they don't fit in. Well, so we want to find, are they really an outlier? So I'm giving you your Q1, Q3, or IQR. We learned how to find those last class. Remember, you could plug all that data into your calculator and get the answer. So let's first look at low outliers. So to be a low outlier, that means it has to be less than Q1 minus 1.5 times our IQR. So that's 22.2 minus 1.5 times our 0.4, which I get 21.6. Okay, so that means that our 21.5 is less than 21.6, so it is an outlier. For our high outliers, you can see that it definitely is an outlier. It's below. Our high outlier, Q3, so 22.6 plus 1.5 times 0.4 is 23.2. So that falls here, so that means that our big number up here, both these actually are outliers. So you would say that the cars with fuel economy ratings of 21.5 and 23.3 would be considered outliers. So when you do this, you can't just say, yes, there are outliers. You have to show me this work proving that they really are, because what if they would not have fit in that? So you have to make sure you look at that. So then why do we want to look at outliers? Okay, why is it important for us to do that? So why look at outliers? For several reasons. They might be inaccurate data values. Maybe we entered them wrong if they are way outliers. So I have to go back and look at our data. They could indicate a remarkable occurrence like, wow, that car gets great gas mileage, or that one gets really bad. What's going on? Looking at things like that. And they can heavily influence the values of our summary statistics. For example, remember when we looked at these last class, the mean and the range and the standard deviation are swayed. They're not resistant to those outliers, so it can change our numbers. So we always want to make sure we look to see if we have our outliers or not. So the next thing we have is a graph that puts together a bunch of our data. And our graph, and I know you've seen these before at some point, are going to be called box plots. Well, to make a box plot, we have to find what is called the 5-number summary. If you are asked to find the 5-number summary, you need to know what that means and what it is you have to find. So the 5-number summary obviously consists of 5 numbers. It consists of the minimum value, the Q1, the median, the Q3, and the maximum. And then we put all of those on a graph. Okay, so on here we can figure out what our values are. We can figure out, we know our min and max are easy. Our median and our Q1 and Q3, I gave those to you, but you also know how to find them. Okay, so when we make a box plot, it is a visual representation of this 5-number summary. Your box plots can be horizontal, they could be vertical, it just depends on how you want to put them. Notice that our min and our max values were actually going to be outliers. So when we have our 5-number summary, we first, to make a box plot, find our 5-number summary. So we did that, right? Check mark here. There's all of our values. Identify outliers. Use the rule, identify if you have any outliers. Well, we do have some outliers. We can see them on here, and that is fine. So we identify any outliers. We're going to draw and label the horizontal axis. So when you label, draw and label, again, your horizontal axis needs to be even as you go through. Don't go from like 1, 2, 3, and then jump to 30. Okay, so make sure that you are doing that correctly. So we're going to draw and label. So here's my highway fuel economy. Notice the label. A lot of us were missing labels on things. Make sure we scale it. So ours is all scaled evenly. It goes up by halves every single time. You pick what it's going to go by. So we've scaled the axis. We're going to draw a box between Q1 and Q3. So where our Q1 and Q3 values were, we're just going to make a box. We are going to put a line down the box where there is a median. So you'd put a line straight down. And then you're going to draw out your whiskers. They go to, notice up here, they extend to the last data value that is not an outlier. If it's an outlier, we don't go that far because the next thing you have to do is mark those outliers. So you're not going to draw all the way out. This is our max and this is our min, but they're outliers. So you can use asterisks or some other little points to represent your outliers. Okay, so a little bit of caution, box plots do not display each individual value, and box plots don't show gaps or clusters. You don't necessarily know in this what is going on in this distance, okay, but then we do it. Also know that usually the box plot generally breaks our data into fourths, so there's 25% from here to here, 25 here, 25 here, and 25 here. Okay, when you have outliers, that distorts that a little bit, but it still works about the same way. You can also use your calculator to make a box plot. So we talked about entering your data in last time. If you entered in all of your data, so if you enter in all of our numbers that we were looking at right here, okay, to find your Q1, just enter them in. They do not have to be in order, but enter them into your data. And then what you want to do is you're going to do your, what it's called a stat plot. So for our stat plot, you're going to hit the second button. So the second button right here. Notice stat plot is above your y equals, so you'd hit second and that y equals, and it's going to give you something that looks like this right here. You need to make sure your stat plot is on. Okay, if you're in 2 math classes, you're going to want to keep this off unless you are in stats because it will mess up if you're trying to graph other equations. Keep that in mind. And then you want to pick what kind of graph you want. Well, we want a box plot. We want this one right here. Notice how this one has these little outliers on it, and the one over here beside it does not. We want it to show outliers. This one's not going to show us outliers. This is a bad one. We want the one that shows the outliers. If you put your data in list 1, make that L1. If you put it in a different list, tell it what list it is. Leave your frequency at 1, and it doesn't matter what the mark and color are. You can make that whatever you want to be. And once you have that, then all you have to do is hit the graph button. So then if you hit the graph button, it's probably going to look just like this, and there's nothing there. If there's nothing there, you then need to go and hit zoom over here and arrow down to zoom stat. And then when you zoom and zoom stat, it's going to, voila, show you a box plot that looks like what you need. Notice the box plot on your calculator, there's no labels down here. So those are still things that you're going to have to put on, but it tells you if you have outliers, even though you still need to show me. I guarantee you'll have to use the formulas to show me. But this is going to be something we will use a lot when we start looking for outliers or how our data is distributed later. Instead of you making a graph, your calculator, you can just look at your calculator and decide. So that is how you would make your box plot on the calculator. So that is the end of section 1.3. You have a worksheet, and then also remember that your 1.3 is due on sapling plus the worksheet when we come back to school on Wednesday of next week. Hope you have a great day and a great weekend.